This will be for the graphs of y equals sine of x and y equals cosine of x. So we're going to start with y equals sine of x. Okay, we'll plot a few xy coordinates. And notice that the x-axis here is not in degrees, that is in radians. And notice that x is going to be the angle measurement. So we're going to use the unit circle to fill in some of these values. So if you recall from the unit circle, the x-coordinates represent the cosine of the angle theta, and the y-coordinates represent the sine of the angle theta. Now, these degree measurements, recall that you start on the positive x-axis and you travel in the counterclockwise direction. All right, so right here on the positive x-axis, that is 0 degrees. All right, and we're not going to do all these points, but just for your information, here at the 45 degree mark, we have radical 2 over 2. And just so you know, the approximate decimal for radical 2 over 2 is actually 0.7. All right, so we're going to use 0.7 instead of radical 2 over 2. Anyhow, we're doing the sine first, so we're looking at the y-coordinates, okay, because that represents the sine. So at 0 degrees, the sine is going to be 0. So let's fill that in. All right, at 0 degrees, or radians actually, 0 radians, the y-coordinate is 0. So it's going to start at the origin. Okay, at 45 degrees, or pi over 4 radians, this is pi over 4 radians, the sine, or the y-coordinate, is radical 2 over 2, which is just 0.7. So at pi over 4, we have 0.7. Okay, so for pi over 4, we have 0.7. Okay, and finally, at 90 degrees, which is pi over 2 radians, the sine, or the y-coordinate, is just 1. So at x equals pi over 2, y equals 1. Okay, so at pi over 2, x equals 1. All right, now I'm just going to extend these values, and I'm going to increment by 1/4 pi each time. All right, so this is 1/4 pi, this is 2/4 pi, next up is going to be 3/4 pi, or 3 pi over 4, and then finally 4/4 pi, which is just pi. Okay, adding another fourth, that's going to be 5 pi over 4, and then 6 pi over 4, which is 3/2 pi, and then 7 pi over 4, and then 8 pi over 4, which is just going to be 2 pi. All right, so I'm going to fill in the values for all of those. All right, so let's see, at 3/4 pi, the y-coordinate is radical 2 over 2, but we said that was really 0.7. All right, and then at pi, the y-coordinate is 0. And then 5/4 pi, 5 pi over 4, the y-coordinate is negative radical 2 over 2. We said that's negative 0.7. At 3 pi over 2, we have negative 1. At 7 pi, or 7/4 pi, we have negative 0.7. And then finally back to the start. This is 2 pi right here, because this is 360, this is 2 pi. So again, we're back to 0. So it basically cycles the same way it did in the first 90 degrees. It cycles around. All right, so 3/4 pi, it goes back to 0.7. So right here, it's going to be 0.7. And then back to 0. And now we get into the negatives, negative 0.7. And down to -1. And then back up to negative 0.7. And then back to 0. All right, so let's fill in these points. We have 0, 0 right here. And then at pi over 4, which is going to be in between 0 and pi over 2, it's 0.7. So it's about right there. At pi over 2, we have 1. 3 pi over 4, which is in between these two, comes back down to 0.7. And then at pi, it's back to 0. 5 pi over 4, negative 0.7. Okay, 5 pi over 4 is right here, negative 0.7. And 3 pi over 2, it's at -1. And then it climbs back up to negative 0.7. And then at 2 pi, it's 0 again. All right, so I'll zoom in a little bit here. And the sine wave will look like this. It's going to curve up and then curve down and then curve back up. Okay, so that's one period of the sine wave. You can draw it on the other side as well, but it is basically just continuous. Okay, it just keeps going like so. I want to keep it simple for now, so I'm just going to start at the origin and draw that much of it. So while I'm here, we might as well do y equals a negative sine of x. Okay, so we basically took the y function and multiplied it by -1. And what that does is cause a reflection about the x-axis. Okay, so the x-axis acts as a mirror when you multiply the entire function by -1. So it's going to be the same thing, okay, but just flipped over the x-axis. All right, so instead of like it is in red, we still start at the origin, but instead of headed to the max, we first head to the minimum. All right, and then it goes like this, and it goes like that. All right, so the negative sine of x is just a reflection over the x-axis. All right, so I'll give you some hints for the Khan Academy for the y equals sine of x. I'll just do it in red here because we did the sine of x in red. Okay, for the sine of x, it starts at the midline and then it heads to the maximum. Okay, so see the midline here is the horizontal line that splits the sine wave in half. So the midline here is just the x-axis, y equals 0. So see, it starts at the midline, heads to the maximum. All right, and then for the y equals negative sine of x, it starts at the midline, and then it heads to the minimum. All right, so see, it starts here, and then it heads to the minimum point. So you're going to need to know that for some of the Khan exercises. Okay, now we're going to be doing the cosine function. So we're going to be looking at the x coordinates. All right. So we start at 0 at 0 degrees or 0 radians. The cosine is going to be 1. So just like before, xy coordinates, okay, at x equals 0 radians, the cosine is going to be 1. All right, and then let's see. At pi over 4 radians, the x-coordinate, or the cosine, is radical 2 over 2, which we said was 0.7. Okay, and then at pi over 2 radians, the x-coordinate is 0. All right, so let's finish these two. We have 0.7 and then 0. So we'll do pi over 2. We said 0.7. I'm sorry, that was pi over 4. Pi over 4, it was 0.7. And then pi over 2, it was at 0. All right, just like before, we'll keep going, incrementing by 1/4 each time. So this is 2/4 pi. All right, we're going to do 3/4 pi, 3 pi over 4. And then 4 pi over 4 is just pi. All right, we have 5 pi over 4. 6 pi over 4 is going to be 3/2 pi. All right, 7 pi over 4. And then 8 pi over 4 is just 2 pi. All right, so going around the circle here, at 3 pi over 4, the x-coordinate is negative radical 2 over 2, so that's negative 0.7. And then at pi, we have negative 1. And then at 5 pi over 4, the x-coordinate is negative radical 2 over 2, so it's negative 0.7. At 3 pi over 2, the x-coordinate is 0. 7 pi over 4, the x-coordinate is radical 2 over 2, so that's positive 0.7. And then we're back to 1. All right, so I'm just going to fill in I filled in the values for the degree or radian measurements, the angle measurements. I'm just going to fill in the x-coordinates here. Negative 0.7, negative 1, negative 0.7, 0, 0.7, and then 1. All right, so here it was headed down, and here it is negative 0.7. All right, and then at pi, it bottoms out at negative 1. Then it heads back up to negative 0.7. All right, back up to 0. And then positive 0.7. And then back to 1. All right, so let's fill them in. At x equals 0, y equals 1. Okay, so we're going to start here. At pi over 4, it's 0.7. Okay, pi over 4 is right here. 0.7. Pi over 2, it's 0. 3 pi over 4, it's negative 0.7. So that's this right here. At pi, it's negative 1. 5 pi over 4 is right here. Negative 0.7. 3 pi over 2 is 0. And 7 pi over 4 is 0.7. And then at 2 pi, it's back to 1. So the cosine wave is basically like that. Okay? And you can draw it, you can keep going on the negative side of the x-axis. It's going to be the same. It's just going to continue the same way. I drew a full period, so it's just going to keep going like that. So as a matter of fact, the sine wave and the cosine wave are actually the same. the cosine wave is just shifted by 90 degrees. Anyhow, since we're here, we might as well also draw in y equals negative cosine of x. Okay, and like we said before, it's just reflected about the x-axis. So instead of starting at 1, it'll be at -1. It'll cross here, and instead of being a min here, it'll be a max right here. Cross here again, this max will be a minimum. So y equals negative cosine of x would be like that. Okay, and again, it continues on the other side the same way. So if we can write out the characteristics just like before for the cosine of x, it starts at a maximum. All right, it starts at a max, and then after that, it heads to the midline. See, this will be the midline right here. So it heads to the midline. All right, and for negative cosine of x, notice it starts at a minimum. And then after that, it heads to the midline.